Dave Talks Comics, Episode 64, Who's OHotMU 2.2. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comic books and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. On this episode of Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about some of the entries in Issue 2 of Who's Who, the definitive directory of the DC Universe, and Issue 2 of the official Handbook of the Marvel Universe. These are the original editions of both series. Made these notes a while ago, but I've gone back and I've reread them. I'm going to go through a few more entries in the Who's Who. So the first entry is Barren Blitzkrieg. Now Barren Blitzkrieg is a Nazi. His group affiliation, of course, is listed as the Third Reich. He first appeared in World's Finest Comics number 246, and then also in 247. Subsequent to that, most of his appearances, his next several appearances were in, there was two things. He did appear in, I think, the Superman versus Wonder Woman issue, which was a special, but what I was thinking of was his appearances in All-Star Squadron. He had a number of appearances in All-Star Squadron, and that's where I first saw him. He first appeared when Steel showed up. Steel, the Indestructible Man, is that right? Commander Steel? I think that's what he was billed as when he first appeared back in the 70s, which was before All-Star Squadron. That was one of those books that went away because of the DC implosion in 78, I think it was. But so basically Barren Blitzkrieg is a Nazi. He wears a metal mask. He wears a very colorful outfit that's yellow and orange and pink. And I don't know why. I never thought about it being strange back then, but it certainly looks strange to my eyes these days, considering the fact that he's a Nazi. But I guess it probably has something to do with the colors that they want to use for comic book pages, what stands out. The other thing that I thought was interesting was they list him it says he later confronted Wonder Woman on several occasions, but when I looked up his appearances in the comic book database, I really didn't find that many appearances with Wonder Woman, other than his first appearance, which was, as I mentioned, in World's Finest 246 and 247, and I guess he must have encountered Wonder Woman in its all-new collector's edition, issue 54, which is billed as Superman versus Wonder Woman. But I really don't see... So I guess they really haven't drawn those issues, those stories, other than those two stories. So that's interesting. So he appeared in All-Star Squadron 6 through 9. Then you didn't see him again until the Earth X story, which is 31 to 35, which I think is an excellent story. And then he also appeared in issues 45 and 46. And I mentioned his connection to Commander Steel. So moving on, you've got Baron Winters is next. Now, Baron Winters is the leader of Night Force, which was a comic book that came out in the I believe it was the early 80s, not the late 70s. The early 80s, yes, around 82. And it ran for about 14 issues. There was a revival. There was another Night Force series in the mid-90s, 96, 97, which ran for about a dozen issues. And other than those, he really hasn't appeared too much in the DC universe. I mean, he's shown up from time to time, but it's kind of rare. He's not... He kind of has, I think, some magic-based powers, although, well, it says... In his entry, it says, as far as can be determined, Baron Winters possesses limited psychic abilities, but does not seem to have any specific physical powers. Now, this, of course, was written in 1985. I'm not sure if they revamped that in the 90s when they brought him back. But, and this is a beautiful picture drawn by Gene Colan, who drew I'm not sure if he drew the revival of Night Force, but he certainly drew the original run of Night Force, which was part of, I think, what drew me into it. And it definitely has a supernatural element. I wouldn't say horror, but I think it's definitely influenced by some of that stuff. So something along the lines of, Dr. Fate and the Spectre, but without the cape. And although he does wear a cape now that I look at the picture. Okay, so next is the Barren Earth. Now I got to say, this is one that I was completely unfamiliar with, so I did some digging, some research on this one. This was a backup feature in Warlord, and the entry here says the first appearance was Warlord 55, but I don't think that's correct. From what I could find, its first appearance was in Warlord 63, and so it was a backup feature. It ran for about 23 issues from Warlord 63 to Warlord 88, and it didn't run in every single issue, but most of the issues in that run. And then there was a mini-series called Conqueror of the Barren Earth, which was 4 issues. And after that, there really wasn't anything that I don't think there's been any appearances of it since then. So, I mean, okay, the writer of this was Gary Cohn, Cohn, and I looked him up to see what else he had done. He did an OMAC backup, which also ran in Warlord a little earlier, I believe, than this did. He also was the writer of Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, which is a 12-issue series that I did not read back in the day. I believe it has been revived a few times. And I'm kind of curious, and I'm kind of thinking about going back and picking that up. I'm not sure. I've got a lot on my plate, so I really don't need to. But I'm kind of curious to read that, and I really do like some of the covers of that. And he was also the writer of Blue Devil, or at least on the original run of Blue Devil. So the next entry... with the next entry, we get into the Bat characters. So, the next entry isn't a Bat character, but the Batcave. The Batcave first appeared in Detective Comics number 83. Well, that was its first appearance in comic books. That was in January of 44, but actually it first appeared in a Batman movie serial from 1943. And... it was something else I wanted to say about that. And it's, Detective Comics number 83 was January of 1944, so this movie serial was 1943. And that wasn't uncommon. I think that, like, for instance, a lot of things in the Superman mythos also came from movie serials or from the radio programs. Like, I think Kryptonite did, and Krypton, and... a bunch of, I think that the Daily Planet, the name The Daily Planet, and possibly Perry White, and maybe Jimmy Olsen. I'm not certain on those. But, and so it's not uncommon for things to have first appeared in a movie serial and then be brought into the comic books from there. In the same way that characters today, like, that came from the cartoons, like I believe Renee Montoya first appeared in Batman the Animated Series, and then was later made a character, and Harley Quinn, another one. So, let's see, what else about the Batcave? Well, later on, it would be computerized. I mean, at the point this was written in the 80s, it had a computerized crime lab, and they give you a kind of a breakdown of the, kind of a side view of the Batcave, although it isn't real detailed. I've certainly seen more detailed. It's definitely not a floor plan. It's just kind of a side view of it. It's not anywhere near as detailed as the one from the official handbook of the Marvel Universe of Avengers Mansion. That was crazy detailed. So they don't even attempt to really do this to scale or anything. They show you where the Batcopter and the Batplane are, and the Bat boat. And, of course, there's the trophy room, which has some of the most iconic things about the Batcave. And I guess some of the iconic things that I think of, especially in comic books, but even in movies and television, would be the stalactites and stalagmites. And then in the trophy room, you've got that big giant penny and the dinosaur, which I believe was a robot. Another thing that they mention in this entry is that Batman, there was a period in the 70s when Batman wasn't living in Wayne Manor, because that's where the Batcave is. It's underneath Wayne Manor. And I think it's even been shown that way. I mean, even in the old Batman TV show and in other movies like the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton films, and the Christian Bale, and the name of the director is Christopher Nolan films. And but there was a period in the 70s in the comic books when Batman was living in a penthouse in Gotham City, and at that point he set up a second Batcave, which was in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath the Wayne Foundation building. And according to this entry, the second Batcave now serves as a sometimes headquarters for the Outsiders. Now this, of course, is 1985. The Outsiders are not the same team that they were then. And this was very early on in the history of the Outsiders. And there is a book from Tomorrow's called The Batcave Companion. I haven't really thoroughly researched that, so I'm not sure exactly how relevant that is to this entry. Okay, finally we've got Batgirl. Now, Batgirl was introduced in Detective Comics number 359. She was actually the second character to have that name. There was another Batgirl before her who was the sidekick of Batwoman, the original Batwoman. But this Batgirl is, of course, Barbara Gordon. And so she first appeared there. Then she was in a run. That was in 1967, Detective Comics 359. And then from 70 to 72, she appeared in a run of also Detective Comics from 404 to 424. Then she was in Batman Family from issues 1 through 20. And then she also appeared in most issues of Detective Comics from 481 to 519, and that was from 1979 to 1982. So pretty much from the early 70s until the early 80s, she was appearing fairly consistently, although she did not have her own book, per se. Of course, Batgirl is Barbara Gordon. She's Jim Gordon's daughter, who's, of course, the commissioner of police. And she wears a similar outfit to Batman. And, okay, so some things that happened to her, of course, after the publication of this Who's Who was The Killing Joke, which I still haven't read. It's on my list of things to read. And she became Oracle after that, because that's when she was crippled by the Joker. She was played by Yvonne Craig in the Batman TV show, the Adam West TV show. I don't know the name of the actress who did the voice character in Batman the Animated Series. I don't know if there's any really good Batgirl. I don't know, there may be. I did not look into that to see. The one series, the one other comic book that I think that's worth mentioning is Batgirl Year One by Chuck Dixon, Scott Beatty, who wrote it. The two of them wrote it, and most of the art is by Marcos Martin. And I wasn't crazy about that when I read it. I still have the issues. It's a 9-issue miniseries. It is available in trade, and but I love the art. I think it was the first time I'd seen Marcos Martin's art, and it's one of those things I think I should go back and give a second try to. So I think that's about it for Who's Who 2.2. Next time, I will be getting into characters like Batman himself and other characters who have Bat in their name, even though they're not part of the Bat family, like Batlash. First character I'm going to talk about is Binary. Now, Binary is an interesting character because she's had a number of identities, and when I looked her up in the comicbookdb.com, I found she has 5 different entries. So her real name is Carol Danvers, and that's the first entry. And she first appeared as Carol Danvers in Marvel Superheroes number 13, which appeared in which was published in March of 1968. Her next identity was as Ms. Marvel. Now, she first appeared as Ms. Marvel in Ms. Marvel number 1, which was published in January of 1977, so that's about 9 years later. After that, then her next identity was as Carol Danvers. And a little bit of back history here. As Ms. Marvel, she had fought Rogue, who later became a member of the X-Men, but Rogue was a mutant who's had the ability to steal other people's superpowers just by touching, by skin-to-skin contact. And normally the effects were temporary, but because the skin-to-skin contact with Ms. Marvel, and I'm not sure if this happened in Avengers Annual 10, it might have, or maybe it was just told that it was revealed then that it had happened. But so what happened was that Rogue basically permanently stole Ms. Marvel's powers, her flight and super strength, and I can't remember, probably some invulnerability. I don't remember if she had any, probably some super speed, but I think that's about it as far as her superpower set went. But Rogue, of course, still had the ability to steal other people's powers. So in Uncanny X-Men number 164, when the X-Men were in space fighting the Brood, the Brood did some experiments on Ms. Marvel, or on Carol Danvers, because of her interesting physiognomy. Because even though, I'm not even sure if physiognomy is a real word, but even though she didn't have superpowers anymore, there was still something different about her. And what they ended up doing was unleashing this power, and she became Binary, who was this character who had these abilities to unleash basically the power of a star. And it was super powerful and ended up being very important in the battle with the Brood. And I thought this was a comic book that I read when I was growing up. I had a subscription to X-Men at that point, and this was a great storyline. Recently, I listened to an excellent podcast on this. It was a podcast called Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, and it was not their most recent episode. I'm trying to find what the episode is right now. Let's see, it was The Brood They Carried, episode 20, which was from August of 2014. And it's a really good episode. It's a really good show. I really recommend it, especially if you're interested in the X-Men. And I think they do a really good job. I've kind of come late to the show, but I kind of went back and I've started to go through their podcast and listen to them episode by episode. And like I said, if you've got any interest in the X-Men, understanding the X-Men, it's a fun podcast. They really have a lot of fun doing it. And it's a little crazy, and they can be very flip about it, but at the same time, you really get their passion for this series and these characters. And and that particular episode, if you're interested in knowing more about Binary, it's not all about Binary, but they certainly cover this story. So that's Ms. Marvel or Binary. Oh yeah, and then later on she would go on to become Warbird, who first appeared. She first appeared as Warbird in West Coast Avengers Annual Number 1, which was in 1986. And although she didn't use that identity very much, because the next appearance as Warbird was basically not till 1998, at least from what I could figure. And then finally, in June of 2012, she became Captain Marvel, although she had gone back to the Ms. Marvel identity between, at some point, because I remember there was a Ms. Marvel book about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And so now she is currently Captain Marvel. So I think that's enough for Binary. Next you have Black Bolt. Black Bolt is a member of the Inhumans. He's the leader of the Inhumans, the monarch of the Inhumans, according to the Sentry. This picture is drawn by Mike Zeck. Oh, and the Binary picture was drawn by, by Dave Cockrum. So Black Bolt is, I really thought it was interesting how they described his powers as quasi-sonic voice. And he's somebody who who can't talk, can't make noises with his voice because somehow it releases these shock waves, and even a whisper can cause incredible amounts of damage. And he's got this interesting black outfit with these black and blue outfit, and he's got this what do they call it? A fork-shaped antenna, which is on his forehead. It's not part of him, but it's part of his outfit, and apparently it helps him to channel the power that's coursing through his body. Where did I first read? The first time I might have read Black Bolt might have been in the Fantastic Four roast. Although since then I've gone back and read some of the original appearances of the Inhumans, which was in Fantastic Four from the Silver Age, and particular from the Marvel Masterworks volumes 4 and 5, or 5, no, I think it's 5 and 6. The first one is the one that introduces Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and they've got a bunch of, I think there's some interaction with the Inhumans there, although the Inhumans had their own backup stories in there, and I'm not sure if they reprint all of those in those Masterworks. But then there's also, and then the other one, the big introduction is the Black Panther appears in that one. And I'm not going to get to the Black Panther today, but he will be the next time I do a OHotMU. He will certainly be in there. The next character is the Black Cat, a.k.a. Felicia Hardy. This is a Spider-Man universe character. And I say character because, as I understand it, she started off as a bad guy, but she's no longer a bad guy. Her first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man number 194, which was cover dated July 1979. For the most part, she doesn't have any superpowers, but according to this entry, she has a bad luck field effect, which is that it's I've always found these kind of weird, these characters who had these luck powers who would always seem to either help them or hurt other people, or hinder other people when they're trying to get something done. And they describe it as a rudimentary mutant psionic ability. Now, I looked on comicbookdb.com, and they kind of explained it away. I'm not going to get into all that. This is not a character that I'm very familiar with. I really want to talk about things that I have some familiarity with. I'm talking about her because she's in the book, and just to say that I don't know that much about her, but that basically she's a cat burglar. She's, I believe, been romantically linked to Spider-Man. And I think she's had a fair number of appearances over the years. It's interesting to note that in comparison to Carol Danvers first appeared as Binary. Binary first appeared as Carol Danvers, a non-superhero, a non-superpowered character, but the Black Cat apparently first appeared as the Black Cat. So, okay, the next character, wow, I sure crawled down a rabbit hole, or something like that when I went into this character, and that's the Black Knight. Now, this is actually the third character to be known as the Black Knight, and actually there's 4, and I'm going to mention the other 3. So the first Black Knight, and 2 of these, well, Black Knight 4 isn't in this book, doesn't have an entry in here, but Black Knights 1 and 2 are listed in the appendix in the back, and they get short descriptions. Black Knight 1 was Sir Percy of Scandia, and he was King Arthur's greatest warrior and a protege of Merlin, who gave him his enchanted ebony blade. And it says here that the Black Knight was murdered by Modred, the king's traitorous nephew, during the fall of Camelot, but his spirit has appeared several times to counsel his descendant, the current Black Knight, and that's the one who the first entry that I was looking at. Now it says here that his first modern appearance was in Marvel Superheroes number 17, and I think they say that because that's the first appearance once the age of Marvel Superheroes began. But prior to that, he did have his own comic book, which was called The Black Knight, which ran for 5 issues in 1955, 1956. Those issues were reprinted in Marvel Superheroes issues 12 through 16, and those Marvel Superheroes issues, I believe, appeared in the late 60s, mid to late 60s. Let me see if I can look that up real quick. Let's see, I have, no, not Black Bolts. Nope, not Black Cat. Black Knight, yes. So, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to look that up, but, so Black Knight 1 is the ancestor of Black Knight 3. Now, Black Knight 2, his name was Nathan Garrett, and he was a criminal. He was a bad guy who disguised himself as a knight. So, but he was also a descendant of the original Black Knight, just like the third one was, and he was the uncle of the third Black Knight. He rode a mutated winged horse and carried various weapons, including a lance that projected blast rays. I'm reading this directly from the book. It's not very long, so. He was the uncle of the current Black Knight and a member of the original Masters of Evil. His first appearance was in Tales of Suspense number 59. And that, well, actually, that isn't what I found. According to what I found, he first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 52, which was cover dated February of 1964. He was killed in Avengers number 47, which was December of 1967. But apparently that happened, it was only spoken about then, or shown. It was a flashback, I think, in Avengers 47. But it actually happened sometime after the events of Tales of Suspense number 73. Yes, Tales of Suspense number 73. And he was a bad guy, and he kind of wanted to make up for what he'd done, and so he convinced his nephew, Dane Whitman, who is the third Black Knight, who is the one that got the full-page entry in Who's Who, and was the current Black Knight, and I think he's still the Black Knight that appears in the comics today. And he was a scientist. He was the nephew of the second Black Knight, and so he tried to make up for what his uncle had done. He did eventually wield the ebony blade like his ancestor did, but prior to that, he wielded the energy lance that he acquired from his uncle. I found it interesting. There are at least a couple of horses at this point that he had ridden, winged horses. The first one was Aragorn, which was a white horse that had bird-like wings, which first appeared about the same time he did. I think the next issue, he first appeared in Avengers number 47, but although it says 48 here, but what I found on Comic Book DB, it indicated 47, and Aragorn first appeared also in that issue. And He later gave Aragorn to Valkyrie, a character who's a member of the Defenders. And although I couldn't find out exactly when that happened, I tried looking in a few different ways, but it was unclear to me. And if you look up Aragorn in Comic Book DB, he's listed as Valkyrie's steed. So I thought that was interesting. That so I don't think that the Black Knight had Aragorn for very long. Certainly, Valkyrie was riding Aragorn by Defenders number 4. Although I don't know if there was any overlap between when she had it and when he had it. Maybe they were both being portrayed as riding Aragorn in different issues, because he would show up in the Avengers and she would show up in the Defenders. I'm not sure. Now, there was another steed, which is the one that you see in the entry in Who's Who, which is a black horse which had bat-like wings, and his name was Valinor. Although when I looked up Valinor, it looks like he first appeared in some Marvel UK, in the United Kingdom, comic books. As I understand it, and I'm definitely not an expert on this, and I have not researched this, but as I understand it, Marvel UK did print, not just reprint comics that the US Marvel, United States Marvel comic book publishing company was printing, but they also came up with their own stories, and they quite often used characters that came of British origin. Of course, the Black Knight does come from England, and they had a Black Knight story that was ongoing there, and I think from what the research I did, it seems that Valinor first appeared there. And to make matters even more complicated, this Black Knight who appeared in the Marvel UK comics was not Dane Whitman. He was Sir Eobar of Garrington, and he is not listed in here. I didn't really do a lot of research on him, but it seems like they may be conflating things a little bit. I'm not sure exactly when Dane Whitman started riding Valinor, and if they've ever really reconciled the two. Although, actually, if they ever have, it's probably in that Black Knight miniseries from 1990 that I believe was written by Roy Thomas. It may have been Roy and Dan Thomas. And I do have it. I haven't read it. It's probably been a good 24, 25 years since I've read it. But doing all this research into the Black Knight certainly has reinvigorated my interest in the character and made me want to go back and read some stories that I have not read. Some of the original Avengers stories are a little pricey, but there are some other stories which I'm hoping I can pick up from the 80s that might not cost me too much money. There's an Avengers story from Avengers 225 and 226, which is November-December of 1982, that was written by Stephen Grant and Greg LaRocque, drawn by Greg LaRocque, that I'm interested in picking up. Then there's a Doctor Strange story, Doctor Strange 68 and 69, from December of 84, February of 85, which was written by Roger Stern and drawn by Paul Smith, that I'm interested in. And then there's an issue of Avengers Spotlight, which I believe came out right about the same time as that Black Knight miniseries that I mentioned. And this is also written by Roy and Dan Thomas. And it was drawn by Greg Capullo, who I believe draws Batman or Detective Comics these days, something like that. Although I haven't read those, so I really don't know much about them. There was also a story in Marvel Fanfare which at first looked interesting, but it's a 3-parter, and according to Comic Book DB, it looks like each part was drawn by a different person. It was written by Stephen Grant, who also wrote those 2 issues of Avengers that I mentioned, but I don't know, 3 different artists. I'm kind of, maybe if I find it in a long box at a convention and it's rather inexpensive, I might pick those 3 issues up. But otherwise, I doubt I'm going to. Let's see. The only thing I wanted to mention is that there was an episode of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends from the early 80s, the 11th episode from the first season, and it is available on Netflix, called Knights and Demons, which the Black Knight appeared in, although I think this would probably be the first Black Knight, because it's a Black Knight who comes from the past into the present. And if I can, I'm going to try and get a sound clip from that to play, a sound clip which I remember very distinctly, where I thought it was the Black Knight who was crying out about the ebony blade, but I think actually it was Merlin when I went back and watched it about a year ago. So let's see, that's about it for the Black Knight. There's only two more characters I want to talk about, and those are, the first one is Blacklash. Now, Blacklash is also known as Whiplash, and probably best known to people as he was the villain in Iron Man 2, played by Mickey Rourke. But he originally, so in the movie he was called Whiplash. In the comic book he was originally known as Whiplash, and as Whiplash he first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 97, which ran in January of '68. And he was, like in the movie, he was basically an Iron Man villain. I once again don't have a lot of history with this character. He had a number of appearances over the years between '68 and when he first appeared as Blacklash in 1981 in Iron Man number 146. Although his last appearance as Whiplash, prior to appearing as Blacklash, was in Iron Man number 127, and he'd had a number of issues he'd appeared in. I think it was like 123 to 127, and he was a member of a team that were trying to take down Iron Man. But I haven't read those issues. That's from doing a little bit of research on Comic Book DB. Let's see, anything else about him? Well, yeah, the other thing is there would be about 18 years between the time the last time he appeared as Whiplash in Iron Man number 127 until he went back to the Whiplash identity, which was in Elektra number 97. I'm sorry, Elektra 7, which was dated May of 1997. There's a few issues that I'm kind of interested in picking up and reading. There's a couple of issues of Marvel Team Up, number 72 from August of '78, which he appeared as Whiplash, and then in number 145, Marvel Team Up number 145 from September of '84, where he appeared as Blacklash. I don't know. These issues may be crap. I don't know. I'm just kind of interested in picking them up. And then also Iron Man issues 146, 147, and 148. I already have 149 to 151, which includes that Doom Quest story, that awesome Doom Quest story where Iron Man goes back in time with Dr. Doom and winds up in Camelot. And hey, how's theirs for a coincidence? I was just talking about the Black Knight the original Black Knight was from Camelot. But it would be nice to have all those issues in a row, because I want to reread the Doom Quest story, so maybe I could read the Blacklash story and then the Doom Quest story, and that would be kind of neat. I think that's about it for Blacklash. Basically he doesn't have any superpowers. He wields a whip made of cobalt, which apparently, let me see. Let me make sure I get composed of, no, not cobalt, of woven boron filament impregnated sapphire strands plus steel braid. Once again, there goes Marvel with the extremely detailed descriptions, which I can't really follow. I do remember they said somewhere in here that the whip can actually travel up to supersonic speeds, I believe. Let me see. Yes, it says, whereas these whips can be snapped with the tips reaching twice the speed of sound, whereas a normal leather whip barely reaches the speed of sound. So, sounds impressive. And he's got an interesting outfit. He's basically purple and pink and green. So another one of these villains, kind of like Baron Blitzkrieg when I was talking about the DC side of the house, or side of the aisle, who doesn't appear quite as fearsome because of the colors he wears, or I don't know. Maybe I'm just being judgmental there, but it's interesting choice of colors. Let's put it that way. I don't know. I always think of bad guys as wearing black and being ominous, although there's plenty of good guys, I guess, who wear black. I mean, Spider-Man went through a period where he had the black costume, and yeah. Okay, anyway, the last character I'm going to talk about from the OHotMU this time around is Black Mamba. And this is a character I really don't have any history with at all. I know very little about. Basically just what I read in here. Her first appearances was in Marvel 2-in-1, number 64. She'd only appeared in 4 comics prior to this appearance in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. She was a member of the Serpent Squad. As far as her powers go, it says she's able to telepathically scan the mind of anyone within 100 feet and pluck the image of someone that person loves or trusts. And basically, I mean, it sounds like she has hypnotic powers. And also the ability to drain their life energy. But the people will die in ecstasy. And I'm just kind of skimming this entry here. And her powers came from... Yes, it says she underwent an operation to surgically implant a special component in her forebrain, enabling her to tap her brain's energy in a unique way. And that was done by the Roxxon Corporation, which I think has come up once or twice before on this show. I know that it came up when I was talking about Namor about a year ago, the Namor series that John Byrne wrote and drew, because they played a part, because there was a heavy environmental angle, and of course Roxxon is kind of like the Exxon of the Marvel Universe. And anyway, I really don't know much about this character other than what I just read right here. She, like I said, she first appeared in Marvel 2-in-1. I think there was also appear in Marvel Team Up. She did have a lot of appearances in Captain America in the late 80s, early 90s. I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So that's it for this, for the official handbook of the Marvel Universe 2.2. That's it for episode 64 of Dave Talks Comics. Visit Dave Talks Comics on the internet at davetalkscomics.com, where you can download and listen to past episodes. The show's email address is davetalkscomics@gmail.com. If you're looking for more information on comic books, then I recommend trying Comic Book DB or comics.org. For a more complete list of websites I use when preparing to record an episode of Dave Talks Comics, go to davetalkscomics.com and click on the links link near the top of the page. Next time on Dave Talks Comics, I will be talking about episodes 6 through 9 of JLU, Justice League Unlimited, Season 2. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.
Give me the ebony blade! or you shall be destroyed!
You seek the Ebony Blade, demon? Your search is ended!
The Black Knight. Vengeance is sweet.
You wear a demon's guise, but your voice betrays you, Mudred!
The quest is ended. The Ebony Blade is mine! Now I am free, and evil inherits the earth!
Mudred, by the power of the Merlin Medallion, you are banished once more, back to the land of shame!
No! The demons! They'll destroy me! No!